little webinar here, too much or too little, correct staffing with Depensys and CoolCare. Maybe I should have popped a PCS logo on there to avoid confusion. So moving sort of swiftly on, we've got a webinar about correct staffing. And I think one of the things that sort of CoolCare usually is best well known for is the operational side of operating a care home. It's all about making operating the care home easier, more efficient, and ultimately more profitable if that's your aim. So we're all about kind of the operations. CoolCare doesn't normally get involved in the care side of the equation. That's where our integrated partners such as Person-Centered Software and Nourish are the experts in it. However, when I heard about the this new product that PCS was adding to their overall ecosystem, a way in which you can correctly calculate staffing, that actually sort of fits extremely well with kind of what CoolCare does, and we'll go into a bit more detail. But the choices of how many to staff is information that is inputted into CoolCare, and then CoolCare regulates and keeps on top of your vision, if you like. So we want this amount of staff. This is our budget. CoolCare is all about making sure you achieve as closely as possible what you put in the system to do. Depensys is all about helping you with information-led decision making, get the right number to put into CoolCare. So hopefully that kind of makes sense for everybody that's listening to this webinar as to the point of why we're doing a webinar on this specific subject. But over to Lynette to tell us a little bit about yourself. So you are a PCS employee. However, you've got quite an experience in the industry, haven't you?
Yep. So my name's Lynette Cobain. I am part of the business development team at Person-Centered Software. My background is clinical. I am a registered nurse. I previously was a service manager in a complex care setting, and my service implemented a different digital product initially, and which then transitioned on to PCS because it was identified that the initial digital product wasn't fit for the purpose of my service. So we then implemented PCS as a product, and I have then come to work for the organisation, really because I believe in the product and I know what it has done for my service as well as multiple other services. And had we have had a product like Depensys at the time that I was working in service management, that would have been a vastly different approach to staffing. Depensys is an amazing product. It is a dependency assessment tool that calculates the optimised staffing needs by categorising residents' dependency need levels using a needs analysis tool. It is able to identify the skill mix requirements to support each resident, so it has the ability to be able to identify clinical needs as well as residential needs, and that's really important in services. And from a service management perspective, that's a really important factor when taking into account what we do need to input into our services on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So by being able to factor that into the equation and using a product such as CoolCare to then input sort of resident needs alongside staffing dynamics, it allows us to factor in the sort of financial implications for our services.
Cool. Thank you. That's quite the introduction. So we'll kind of go through a usual sort of agenda here, really, which is addressing kind of what are the issues can be, and then really looking at the solutions. And in this instance, of course, we're very much talking about Depensys as being the solution. There are other alternative solutions out there in the shape of, it's not as if nobody has been looking at dependency up until today. There are, of course, every single participant on this webinar will have their own processes and systems, but we're kind of just going to lift the hood on this whole thing and kind of get into it. So, yeah, I mean, the challenge is really, according to Chloe, the CQC, this would be in England, but of course it's exactly the same sort of requirements in Scotland, is how does the service make sure that there are sufficient numbers of suitably qualified staff to support people to stay safe and meet their needs. And that is ultimately a Chloe that I think everybody knows very well. And yeah, how do you know you're doing it right? You know, you've got the right numbers. And of course, the challenges are overstaffing and understaffing. The issues are of overstaffing if you're kind of additional wage costs, you're perhaps overstaffing because, or you're understaffing, and then you have to use agencies. You have premium rates in agency, and throughout the country, I ask people kind of what rates are they paying, and it can be anything from 1.2 above or 20% above normal pay rate to double and even more. So that can be a kind of somewhat of a challenge if you're kind of not getting it right from your own staff. Understaffing, stress, and burnout a team is not an uncommon discussion. Of course, there is a compliance risk, there's a complaint risk, and of course, staff don't like being understaffed, so there is a staff churn. So over and under of staff is an issue, but over under is skilling, which I think we understand the underskilling is obviously a compliance risk and stress and burnout. But I pulled some data just off a Care England on the average pay, and this is October's data, so it's as fresh as you can really get. And there is a difference between those, the different sort of pay rates that individuals are receiving. And in the respect of if you're overskilling, you could be paying considerably more than you absolutely have to. And of course, if it's an emergency, I think most people would justify that. But almost the whole point of Depensis and CoolCare is to try and mitigate the likelihood of emergencies, really trying to get a bit of a better handle on that. Of course, it's all about demonstrating compliance, and Depensis is a very helpful tool with that. So would be somebody's own Excel spreadsheet or anything like that. But it does make it very easy to keep up to date, and it does need to be reported easily. So if the CQC wants to see it, you have to be able to give that information easily. And I know that if you've got kind of complex Excel spreadsheets, they can be somewhat house of cards teetering. And then, of course, it is very much about transparency. And one of the key areas that we get asked at CoolCare is all about kind of sort of centralized and decentralized decision making. So perhaps somebody at regional level or group level might be making decisions on staffing and how many staff a home should have, and then the home themselves implement that. So having that transparency, having the ability to see this information from all around the company, rather than on somebody's personal desktop with an Excel spreadsheet, is a challenge. Other than sending those Excel spreadsheets around and asking for confirmation, and shared documents, shared drives, and those sorts of things. And then, of course, you do want to try and communicate through the wage costs through to payroll. If you are looking at changing the dependency levels of those specific residents, then there's a possibility you might be wanting to change the fees that the residents being charged. And of course, there is a bit of a heads up somewhat of, depending on the dependency, we may not want to potentially take that resident on board, or if we are taking them on board, there's a considerable wait list until we do something about our staffing levels. And of course, ultimately, all of that is of interest to the people that are funding, running, paying for the actual operation itself. So over to you, Lynette, and we've got the ability to sort of pop over to a demo now. But if you pretty much
Yep.
already explained what it does, but I'll stop
Mhm.
sharing and you should be able to start sharing yourself.
So what you can see here is just really your base login screen for Depensis.
Oh, I can't see anything there, Lynette.
Oh, wait a little minute.
Do you want to try that again? I think
Oh,
you can only
second.
share, one person can share
When
at a
you're
time.
stopped.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so
So I
just
had
give
to
me a little second.
stop and let you. Yeah, you're too far from the drawer.
Let me come back. You've gone onto a different screen, so just give me a little
Yeah,
second.
it's always the way, isn't it? Chase my screen around.
Aha.
Again, just to ask Lynette sorting that out. If anybody's got any questions, there is a web chat. It's like chat in the in your control panel. You just start typing in there, and your message will come up, and we can put them to Lynette. But I would say she's very good at explaining exactly what that thing does. So it's
Okay.
almost worth letting her give Just
Sorry, you were just on a different screen there. So sorry, just apologies for the technical issue there. So you were on a different screen from what I was. So that was where the issue arose there. So let me just share my screen with you just now. So what you can see here is the main login screen for Depensys. As we know that, as I mentioned, staffing pressures in care settings are always a hot topic. PCS are really committed to providing solutions, and Depensys became a part of the PCS Connected Care Suite earlier in the year. And really, we want to enhance the quality of care received by those living in care. So Depensys is a research-led tool that's been tried and tested in care homes for over 20 years, and that factors in the levels of resident needs analysis. So it's a very simple product to work with. I will sign in here just now. What you can see here when we very first log in is that I have multiple different home settings here just now, and we have various different settings within Depensys. What you can see at a glance is the occupancy levels of each individual service. We have our dependency indexes, we have our Depensys hours, our actual hours, etc., etc. So for purposes of demonstration, I'm going to go into a service. I'm just going to choose this one, which is any service. It really doesn't matter. What you can see here at a glance is a main dashboard for that service. And the system generates me Depensys hours, which is based on the needs analysis of our individual residents, as well as actual hours, which is based on the staffing profiles that we input into our shift section. You can see it also generates me the Depensys skilled hours that it calculates using the algorithm in the background based upon the needs analysis, and the actual skilled hours that we have in our service based upon our skilled hours on our shift pattern. It generates me a ratio of 1 member of staff to 3.5 residents in the day and 1 member of staff to 9 residents overnight. We can see our occupancy, which is sitting at 87%. We can see our nursing beds and our residential beds, and we can see our vacancies as well as our dependency index. The way that it generates this information is through our resident needs analysis. And if I come into my residents, you can see I have multiples based within ground floor, first floor, whatever it may be, and they are categorised by either residential category or nursing category, and by the total amount of care hours that they require, as well as the skilled care hours that they need. The way that Depensys works on the algorithm is that it generates information based upon the needs analysis of our individual residents. So if I just go into anybody, it doesn't matter who, you can see here that it populates me with a profile of individualised needs analysis questions. Now we can see at the top we have our individual people's names, and we can have our IDs, our NHS ID, etc., etc., and then the questioning surrounding each of the individual needs analysis. Similarly to how PCS works, we have the little question marks. So if I click onto a question mark, it will give me additional information surrounding the needs analysis of that individual person. And if I was to adjust, amend, so we can see here at this moment in time, this person does not have a catheter, so they have a 0 scoring, which populates them as a nursing 4 and the 4.5 care hours and 1.4 skilled hours. However, if I change that, as you can see here, that they have a catheter, it automatically changes within that needs analysis, which will also automatically change in my service needs. Okay, it's a very easy product to work with. It's useful for things like if we have a referral coming through from the discharge hub or social work or our commissioners as an example, we can add in resident needs analysis, which will then populate us with the care hours that may be required, and that then allows us to identify whether we can facilitate that person in our service or not. Or equally, it might identify that we can facilitate them, but we may need additional finance, or we might need additional one-to-one care hours. which clearly requires additional funds. So it's useful for multiple different scenarios in relation to our referral sources, as well as whether we can facilitate things in our service. Again, if I come back to my home dashboard, you can see, as I said, what we need in terms of our skilled hours and what we need in terms of our actual hours in our service. So by using products like CoolCare, where we facilitate our rostering and our finance and payroll, it means that we can accurately predict what we need within our services and what we are going to have to encounter from a financial perspective.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. I mean, this will stop. I've got a couple of questions for you. So back at your sort of group level, you had lots of different homes there.
Yes,
Um, so I believe, well, I know that PCS has kind of tiered access privileges, and so too does CoolCare. I
yes,
presume that that's also the same with Depensis.
it
I
absolutely
can
is.
only see what I'm allowed to
Yep.
see.
That's
So
right. So from a regional ops perspective, maybe you would see all of the services in Sunshine Care as an example, where if I was the manager of the Gables as an example, I would only see the Gables in my dashboard. But from a regional operational perspective, you would see all of your locations identified so that you could compare and contrast for auditing purposes.
got you. And I suppose I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second. Uh, you're reinventing the wheel. What's this doing that my existing processes doesn't do? I mean, that's why would I buy a software product when we've been doing this for years, and we're all right. Thanks very much. What would you? That seems a bit rude,
Yep.
but I think you know what I'm saying.
Absolutely, of course, no, absolutely. So care providers need to evidence that staffing levels are safe and appropriate to meet residents' needs, as we are well aware. CQC and various other regulatory bodies need us to evidence the support that we have for staffing levels deployed in our care homes, and the Health and Social Care Act, as well as the Care Staffing Act in Scotland for CI at the moment has specific requirements that we have a recognised tool to measure the dependency assessment within our services. By using a tool like Depensis, not only does it have a nice user interface and a very easy to use end user perspective, the aspects of being able to report on previous data, should we need to provide that information to commissioners, is very simple, and we don't have the negativity that we might have to go through multiple spreadsheet documents or multiple paper documents that might not be entirely reflective of the situation that was apparent at that specific date and time. Where by using a product like Depensis, it's very easy to gain that evidence in a quick format.
Yeah, I think that's certainly something we see, with our own Cool Care users is easier to use, gets used.
Yes.
So, and the level of training is low. If somebody leaves, I once was at a show and I remember speaking a small show, regional show, and I was speaking to this lady, and I said, do you have rostering software? No, we have Julie. And she pointed to this very sad and tired-looking lady that's standing next to her. And she says, I'm the manager, and Julie does my rota. And I was like, oh, okay. And like, she had a look on her face which was like, I don't really want to be here. I'm very, very tired. And I remember saying, well, what would happen if Julie left? And then the manager said, Julie's never going to leave because she's the only one who knows how to do these things. And I remember thinking, in her eyes, she was pleading, I want to, please let me leave. And I kind of think that sometimes when you have a complex process, um, it often rests with a few individuals, and those individuals know how it works. And if they aren't there, then it doesn't get done, or you're in somewhat of crisis mode. And I certainly know from the accounting side of Cool Care, the invoicing side of things, there can be quite complicated spreadsheets that people are operating, and nobody's allowed to touch them. You can't go near it, but then that creates somewhat of a bottleneck. And I guess that's pretty much what you're saying here, that it need not be a bottleneck at all, because
Absolutely
it is
not. The
incredibly
simplicity.
transparent here.
Yep. And the simplicity of use of the product ensures that most people, given the fact that we have a varying degree of IT literacy within the health and social care sector, but given the simplicity of use of this product means that most people will be able to engage with it. It's accessed via a web browser, which is guaranteed to support the latest versions of Chrome or Edge or Safari, whichever was being utilised. There's not any specific hardware requirements or specific operating systems, and there are a whole range of digital training materials available also to ensure the ease of use for the product. So that in itself, it makes the product very, very easy to use
Yeah.
and accessible for
I
most.
mean, I can see on your actual browser, it's just on a tab. So, I
Yep,
mean, for argument's sake, you can have CoolCare on the other tab,
of
or you can
course,
have CoolCare on the screen, and you can have
absolutely.
your PCS or whatever you've got on
That's
the
right.
left-hand side of the screen. You know, it's very,
Yeah,
very user-friendly. I think
yep,
the other thing that often goes without saying, but probably should be said, is that you don't really have to kind of, I mean, you do have reporting in this, but you don't have to like make reports on
no,
it. It is a report. So anybody at head office, you just log in and look at that, and that's telling you everything. At
yep,
the home level, you see exactly what it does, and it auto computes, calculates, and
that's
makes
right.
its a report itself by its very definition of existence. It does You don't have to kind of run anything and
Nope.
query and
Essentially,
send me
it's
this and don't forget to do that, and yeah.
no, not at all. Essentially, it wants to enable the most efficient running of care home operations, and it supports the well-run services with safer staffing to meet the resident needs based upon the individualised needs analysis, which
Yeah.
essentially is what our regulators want to see. They want to see that we have a efficiently staffed service, however, that is reflective of our individualised resident needs.
Yeah, yeah. It's the granularity and the high level as well simultaneously. It's yeah, and which is normally kind of quite difficult to kind of collate, really. I've got a question for you. So what is classed as skilled care? Which I think is a very fair question. You're in a home, and it had skilled hours and it had
Yes,
non-skilled
and
hours,
unskilled.
so
Yep,
unskilled.
absolutely, absolutely.
And the question is, what is it classed as skilled care? Nursing care, medication staff? Question mark?
Yep,
Question mark?
absolutely. So nursing care is 100% classed as skilled care. Medicators are classed as skilled care, and senior care staff are classed as skilled care. So dependent upon whether you were in a residential service or a nursing service, would indicate the percentage variations between those nurses, medicators, and skilled carers. Now, I think you're possibly on mute, Ian.
I was going to say, would you pop back to the home level for a second? Because
Of course.
you sped around that quite quickly,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
I do actually have a slide to sort of discuss it. But um,
Mm-hmm.
so t tell us a little bit about so we've got the top left-hand corner there. You've got your depensis hours. So what's a depensis hours?
So this year, so I've gone into a different home. So this is essentially a commissioning home, so that you can see just the variations, obviously, in occupancy. So what you can see here is that I only have obviously 8 residents within my service at this moment in time. So it's generating me my dependency hours from those 8 individualised residents. Now, clearly, we can see in this service, as an example, we are vastly overstaffed because we are a commissioning service. And we're vastly overstaffed in terms of our skilled hours also. Now, again, the way that this does this, so if I come into this service, you can see I have my 8 individual residents. So if I come into one of them, as an example, you can see this resident has a total of 2 care hours that are required and 0.8 of my skilled care hours. Okay. And again, what you can also see in this service from a home level, the hours that are generated in the dependency care hours are a combination of all of these residents. So all of these residents will total that 30 hours in total, which is the 8 service users from my occupancy. The skilled hours will also total these 8 residents here. So again, if I come back to that home dashboard, you can see here my 30 hours obviously generated from those 8 individual residents. So again, it just identifies what we can see, particularly in commissioning homes. Commissioning homes are always fairly difficult to assess and identify staffing, because ultimately we need to have enough staff, but in certain circumstances, particularly in commissioning, we often have too many staff to begin with because we are in the process of trying to fill that occupancy. So again, it's useful in terms of commissioning services just to be able to evidence to CQC and CI.
Yeah, and I suppose again, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second here. You're almost also defending your decisions on staffing at this current point in time because you technically are massively overstaffed.
Yes,
Um, well, we shouldn't do that then. We're paying for no,
absolutely.
that's
Of course.
wrong.
Yep, yep.
And of course, there's a justification there as well. It's
Of course.
in the opposite direction to perhaps what's natural. But
That's right.
um, and I know that, I mean, I think I'm sure many of the people who are watching this webinar are aware that CoolCare is part of L&T Care Developments, and L&T Care Development build care homes and operate care homes under different brand names. Um, Ideal Care Homes was one of the well-known brands. It's been sold to HC1. Danforth is one of the brands. Oyster and Adore Care. So they build homes, and in case anybody's unsure on this, they don't build the residents as well. So the homes come empty, and then they commission them, and then they build them up over a certain. Then they have their own formulas as to how to do things, and there's certainly never a kind of question about kind of incorrectly staffing, etc. But it's something that we know very, very well, and they've got various steps within uh, the resident increasing over time that they will use agency very temporarily for the next 3 months as we step on to the next layer. It's planned in. It's planned in 10 years in advance, kind of planned in. But if you're not commissioning 2 brand new care homes a month, you might not know these things. So something like Depensis is incredibly helpful to inform and assist everybody as to where we are all at.
Yeah.
Um,
I think the other thing to just really identify is the responsiveness also to the needs of residents. Therefore, if there is a change to a resident's needs, it's very,
mm,
very simple and quick and accurate to adjust and amend those residents' needs, which then obviously gives us an accurate, reflective, real-time
yeah.
information of what our resident needs are, and that then maybe has an impact on whether we have additional staffing requirements or a reduction in staffing requirements.
Well, yeah, I spotted on when you're in an individual resident, you're setting the needs. There was a small section just says one-to-one care hours.
Yes,
You just click that one up to 8, and then that makes a hell that could make a hell of
of
a
course it
difference.
does.
I mean, it
Absolutely,
really, really
absolutely.
could. I mean, and just one
Yep,
little factor, huge ripple
huge
effect.
variation. Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely,
and then all of
absolutely.
a sudden it's like, oh, we're going to take in two more residents. Hang on a bit. Should we? Or if we are, well, then we're going to have to, up a bank staff level, or we
Yep.
might have to use agency, or actually maybe we have to say, yes, we'll take the resident. We can't take them for at least a month,
And
or
that's the
something like
thing, isn't it? It's
that.
enabling the team within the care home to actually make the correct decisions by utilising appropriate tools
Mm,
that allows them to then accurately predict whether they can facilitate care, or
yeah.
where at the moment we might just say, oh yes, no problem, we can accept that resident, and then we realise 3 weeks down the line that actually their needs are way more than what we initially identified that they were, and actually that's had a detrimental impact on our staffing requirements within our service.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, very good point. I think we've got some questions coming through. We just sort of finish off on this point. I mean, I know that I remember speaking to uh, a Cool Care user, and they're based down in the sort of south coast, and they're in a kind of a town or a city really that's really quite surrounded by rural areas, and the lady there had her own version, quite very complex spreadsheets, but she was very data hungry person. She was an ex-Royal Navy nurse, and she just loved data, and she effectively kind of made it her own um, dependency tracking machine. I don't think she could understand it, but it was good, and she showed it to me, and she'd kind of calculated that for certain care levels the local authority just was not paying enough.
Mhm.
And that was her evidence. Again, you could again, I suppose you do that here as well, is you
Yeah.
can kind of go back and say, hang on a minute, if I were to take a resident of that level of dependency, it's more it would not be economically sensible for me to do that because there would be sort of cross funding for that care type. And she went back to them and just said, I won't be taking it anymore because of the geographic location. The local authority says, well, if you don't go to you, where are they going to go? And it's like, well, that's something you have to address
Yeah.
because the staffing level required is too much for the amount of money that you are going to pay us. And I thought that was an interesting discussion because I mean, if you ever met her, you'd understand why she can just go like that to the local authority. But yeah, it really made the local authority sort of think about what they were doing. So I've got some
And I
questions here.
think
Oh, go on,
it's
sorry.
just one final point on that. It's critically important to recognise that admission of the right or the wrong residents into care settings can have significant impact on cost for services, profit margin for services, and not only that, but the physical ability to meet the needs of those residents. And that's why using a tool like Depensys is, imperative within services.
Absolutely. So got some questions. And Jill, is it all right if we answer the questions in reverse here for a second? So I think the first question is what care types is this for? So that's a straightforward one.
Absolutely. So essentially, it is able to be utilised in most care services, residential nursing services. It can be utilised in daycare. Clearly, we just need to eradicate the nighttime care ratio, so it can be used in daycare settings. It can be used in multiple different settings where people have complex needs, because obviously we increase the one-to-one care hours. It can be used in multiple different settings where people have enhanced emotional needs. So because we can adjust and amend the psychological input, etc., etc. So it can be utilised in most care settings, if not all care settings.
Excellent. Um, these two questions are sort of similar. So what outside of CoolCare does Depensys integrate with, and are there any plans to integrate Depensys PCS CoolCare in the near future? So
Okay,
I'll partially answer that in the respect of at the moment, Lynette, this is a standalone product which is owned by person-centered software. It,
that's right. Yep,
and you were saying that there is plans to integrate it with person-centered software. Can you?
that's
And it's
correct.
all we've got to be careful about talking about development plans and timelines. But any idea of what that would kind of look like?
Yes, essentially. So there are plans in place that there will be integration from the dependency assessments based within PCS at the present time. That is on our current roadmap. We do not have a specific timeline for that as yet, but at the moment it's a standalone product. So essentially, you have, as you've seen there, when I showed our initial resident data, we would add in all of our resident data. All of the resident data is retained, so you don't need to do that every time you do a dependency assessment. So all of that resident data is retained, and it would simply be an adjustment or an amendment. So that therefore increases the efficiency and decreases the resource element that is required for the completion of dependency assessments, which again, if you are using sort of spreadsheet-based tools, etc., then you will definitely see an increase in resource efficiency by using a product like Depensys. But to answer that question, yes, there is plans for integration, obviously with the existing MCare digital care product and Depensys.
So reversing that for a second, I don't actually have to have PCS at all if I wanted to buy this.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
So
Nope.
it's a tool that could be useful for everybody in the
Yes.
future.
Yes,
it will be even better if you also have PCS as well, in the respect that data will flow from PCS into Depensis to save some of the inputting that you currently would do with Depensis,
that's
which
correct.
you currently do somewhere anyway. So it would
That's
just
right.
reduce that down. So it's a
That's right.
time-saving element in that integration.
But
Okay.
it's used as a standalone in many, many
Yeah.
organisations. Many local authorities are using it as a standalone product that don't use PCS or don't use another digital care product. So it is used as a standalone in many, many settings
Got
already.
And so question that it had is, I suppose I answered the first one here from Jill, which was, are there any plans to integrate Depensis PCS CoolCare? So yes, about on the PCS integration. CoolCare is integrated with PCS already in the respect of when you're creating new staff members in CoolCare, you're onboarding the new staff member in the HR area of CoolCare. Um, you can transfer data of that staff member directly into PCS, and it creates a user in person-centered software. The same can be done for residents. So when you're creating a resident, there's a button that you can press, and it creates a resident within person-centered software, which, as we're discussing here, will eventually create a resident in Depensis, of which you'll be pulling data through. And as we see with the the wider person-centered software's integrated partner, would you call it a network? Ecosystem, I think is probably a better term, isn't it? Um, when you create a user in when you create a resident in CoolCare, it goes into PCS. It goes from PCS into digital reception, into pain check, into the EMR. It all filters through. So we are integrated in that regard. To answer the question that I think you're also asking is their data able to come out of Depensis and into CoolCare's rotor? At the current time, there's no specific requirements for that in our milestones. Mainly because this product's quite new and we're sort of bringing it to everybody's attention. If there's demand for it, absolutely we can look at it. Um, I think there would be always a question, and I think even if we did the development that allowed you to just automatically create the budget in CoolCare directly from Depensis, I'd argue that I think most people wouldn't want to use it anyway. They wouldn't just want the system to automatically make such important
Mhm.
decisions. Um, because this is telling you what is a really good idea to do. CoolCare is going to implement your vision. Do you want to just say, yeah, whatever the computer says, I'm going to pass it straight through? Yes, you might do, but I think in my experience, the vast majority of humans like to have a fire break in systems just to double check, just to be, I want to make sure that's right, rather than just I didn't make those decisions. And of course, a registered manager saying, well, I didn't make these decisions, it was all the computer, and I can't see that really ever being a thing. But we'll see, we'll see. So it's always a possibility. So thanks for the demo there, Lynette. We've got a couple of little slides to finish off with. So hopefully I should be able to share back to the original page. Da-da, da-da. Is that come up there?
Mhm.
Make sure. Yeah, cool. You can never tell with Zoom. There's no ring around the thing. So yeah, so Depensis, it's a dependency and staffing tool for care homes. Um, it's quick and accurately identifying the specific needs of each resident. We are able to convert the needs in the necessary time and skills required to meet them, and compare the suggested staffing levels with the actual level. So it's a great tool. How does that kind of sort of work? So and what does it cost really? So you mentioned that it's web based, but it's really cloud based, isn't it? Really, and you
Yep.
access it through the web.
Yep.
We covered off that it's you have tiered access, so just like every other system these days. And of course, that's technically GDPR by design, so nobody's seeing anything they're not supposed to see.
Mhm.
I say home access and group level access, but really it's kind of home access and group level use, really. Everybody can
Yes.
use it at all the different levels. Doesn't require a PCS subscription. And I've got it down there as £1.50 per service user, but I'm not exactly sure your terminology. So it's £1.50 per
Yeah. per
Yeah,
registered bed or per service user, dependent upon, because clearly there are various different services that use the product. So depending upon the needs of the organisations. So that's correct, £1.50
got you.
per
Brilliant. But
registered.
that's actually less than I thought it would be, to be honest. But that's what do I know? It's but it certainly seems a very reasonable price for a system that's so helpful and useful.
Absolutely.
So we had a few bits on your dashboard there.
Hmm.
Um, talked about what depensis hours and actual hours. Um,
Hmm.
the bit that we didn't really address, because also skilled, unskilled, actual, etc., and ratios is great. Occupancy self-explanatory, but it was the dependency index. It's kind of that was a number that I spotted on there. And um,
Yep.
what's that doing for us? And what does it mean?
So essentially, the dependency index is generated from every resident within our service and the scoring that they are aligned to within the needs analysis. So if they are categorised as a residential 1 or a nursing 5 or whatever it may be, again, it generates that from each individual person within our service, and the algorithm in the background gives us an average dependency index of our service. So we might have 3 residents that are at high dependency and 10 residents that are at low dependency and 25 that are mid-range. But again, it gives us an average of everybody within our service and generates that divided by the amount of people and the levels of dependency and gives us an average scoring.
I've got you. So I mean, if you're kind of a nursing home, you'd be expecting a pretty high number.
Yes,
And then you know that that home is a pure, as far as you can really say, a pure residential home with minimal dependency. And then this is going to give you a heads up on everything else that's somewhere in between, really.
absolutely.
Broadly speaking, in your portfolio of homes, yeah, and it changes, of course, doesn't it? That's the key point.
That's right.
It's not a static number.
It's also really useful to identify that potentially if you were maybe having a referral come through for your service and you had broken down your service into multiple units, and you might
Mm,
identify that one unit had a higher level of dependency on average than another unit. So you had, when you were
mm,
placing that person, it
yeah.
gives you just accurate sort of insight into where might be the most suitable place to place that person.
Mm.
So again, it just gives us really good data that we can work upon so that we're placing residents into the right setting with the right level of input that they require.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And as long as the people in the home are keeping everything up to date, that's going to sort of keep that information very visible, very fresh, so
Yep,
that on a daily basis, of course, dependency levels could change
can
from one day to
fluctuate.
the
That's right.
next, and
Yep.
you're kind of like, should we, shouldn't we? Um, too little or too not enough is the name of the webinar.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes we meet care home groups that are not really care homes per se. It's more like a village, or
Mhm.
they're kind of spread out. Would Depensys be able to work for those? Because you can't just
Yep.
walk next door. It's like an extra
Yep.
5 minutes or
Absolutely.
10 minutes sort of thing.
Yep.
It's not like
So it's
going into the next room.
That's right. That's right. So essentially, what happens if we do have those sort of care villages, or we have, multiple supported living services within the one location, but they're in individualized units, as an example, then we can add in additional hours to take into account the geography factors. So with other tools, such as the Barthel dependency tool, and other dependency tools, we can add in factors such as, geographical location issues, or things like maybe we have a staff member who has repetitive strain in their elbow, as an example, and they can't hoist somebody. So that obviously decreases the care hours that we have within our service. Whereby using a product like the Pensys, we can be able to input those factors, so that we can, we can obviously take into account accurate needs of our staff as well as geography factors.
That's interesting because that's also would allow you to have like a phased return to work for a staff member who's
Yep,
on reduced hours,
yep.
or same hours but reduced abilities because they hurt
Yep,
their back and oh yeah
yep,
they'll be able to race around
yep.
as they used to before the accident and like no they can't and no they shouldn't. So that's you really have got it all really covered here in this, so very very impressive. um okay, I've got a question. How does this work for a supported living model, is a question.
Okay. So in terms of supported living, then you would need to set up your services into multiple different locations. So if all of your supported living services were in a similar locality, then you would set them up as multiple different units. So that essentially you had one parent organisation and multiple different units selected below that. If your supported living services were in multiple different locations, then they would need to be set up as different services. So there's two ways to do that. As I said, if they're all in a similar locality, set it up as different units. If they are in multiple different locations, they need to be set up as different organisational settings.
Brilliant. Excellent. So uh I suppose the inevitable question is kind of how would this interact with CoolCare? um and oh, hang on. So somebody said, is the cost including or ex VAT, is it £1? Is it 150 pound per bed per month? £1 50
One
per
pound
bed per month.
fifty plus
I think that
VAT. Yeah.
Nina, you missed out the dot there, which is honestly genuinely very important. Yeah, so it's £1 50, and is that including? Yeah, including VAT
Ex
or ex VAT? Including
excluding
excluding
VAT.
VAT.
So
Yeah,
£1 50 plus VAT.
yeah, yeah. Okay, there you go. Excluding VAT is the answer to that. Okay, so yeah, I suppose again back to kind of cool care. It's very much about you. It's always been you input your budget. Somebody decides how much the budget should be, and here we're really effectively going before cool care and saying Depensis is going to help you come up with these numbers, and then you put that information into cool care, and cool care is going to do everything it can to help you meet that budget effectively. So it would be in the rota setup in which you're choosing the rota hours, and you're choosing the various shift patterns. Depensis has shift patterns in it as well. So you would just they would if you were buying Depensis tomorrow, you would basically just take the shift patterns that you've already got in Cool Care and recreate them into Depensis so that they're all in there. Um, for those that are maybe slightly less familiar with CoolCare, it is cloud-based also. We've got multi-factor authentication for access. We do have tiered user access as well. So if you want a regional manager to see to 5 homes, you want group to see 30 homes, you want a manager to see 1 home or 2 homes, it's all completely controllable. And other parts of the product as well, of course. So you could have it so you have an admin has access to certain things, but the manager has access to different things, exactly like person center software itself. Um, yeah, and you can access it from anywhere in the world on mobile devices, so that's no problem at all. You have various different reporting levels within Cool Care, so you can report at group level when you're in the group area, and vice versa. And so you can very much see a high level and low level kind of overviews of what's going on in relation to your staffing. And so built within Cool Care automatically, for anybody who's sort of not seen it, there's a traffic light system on. I've put my rotor in. This is what I want to do, and then somebody is going to choose who's going to do those rotor shifts. And it could be that they're regular shifts for individuals, so they're pretty much it's a standard. And your sort of senior carers or nurses, etc. Could be that it's care assistants. You put them into the different patterns, and then if there's gaps, it means they're understaffed. It goes from green, it goes to red, and if you're overstaffing, it goes blue. And so there's plenty of reports within the system that allows you to compare your original budget against what you're rotated to do. So, of course, a rota is usually looking to the future, and their timesheet's looking to the past, as in what happened. So it allows you to compare against what do you want to do and what are you going to do in your rota. What did you want to do and what did you do in your timesheet, and then the ability to compare all three together, and also compare against your occupancy. So effectively, based on what you know and what you set out to do, are you and have you achieved your objective? on correctly staffing. Now, this is operational controls. It's not that you can't change the rota, add additional shifts, or any of those sorts of things based on information you've now found out from Depensys. It could be that you're doing that on an ad hoc basis, or you're baking it into your, continuing rota. But ultimately, yeah, the system's there to help kind of keep you on track. We have clocking options of fobs, still very popular, or biometric facial recognition. So it recognizes your face and effectively means that you can't accidentally forget your face that day. You can't really get away with that. So it kind of keeps your staff on the straight and narrow in that regard. It prevents any possibility of fraud and people sharing fobs. Fob me in the morning, will you, before the boss gets in? Like, no, I'll need to take your face off to do that, like Nicolas Cage. And of course, the system automatically curates timesheets to ensure that when you're having staff coming in perhaps a little early, or if they're coming in, if they're leaving a little early, the system will automatically create them to the correct shift. Or if they stay late and they're not supposed to be there, it will pay them to the end of the shift, when they're supposed to have left. So this effectively Depensys with CoolCare is an end to end on what you should be doing, and or coming up with the answers of what you should be doing, and then ensuring that what you should be doing is what you did, and you do, and then paying accordingly. So hopefully all that makes sense. And if anybody wants any further information on CoolCare, get in touch with ourselves. That's the email address there, or of course we've got tons of videos online about this whole thing. So a couple of takeaways, as we always do with a CoolCare webinar. I think some top tips, but not that you guys probably don't already know most of these, is it is all about accuracy of staffing. The budget, which is both staff numbers and skill sets, needs to match the real dependency levels both day and night. So it's accurate in its granularity, and I think Depensys is certainly helping us get to that level of detail. Rotas to timesheets, that your actual staffing levels in real life actually match the dependency needs in the set budget. So if you put the set budget down, it's not a theory, it's a reality. And then you actually are rotating and having the actual timesheets and paying staff based on what you wanted to do. And again, not for anybody to misunderstand our purpose on point on this, but all of L&T Care Development care homes deliberately overstaff. They always have. They have a little chalkboard, and if you check out the video that we did a webinar back about the data-driven approach with a door, there's actually a photograph of their chalkboard about how many we're supposed to have as staff and how many staff we do have. So they always overstaff automatically. It's built into the model. So it's not just about kind of cutting it back to the bare minimum. It's about kind of doing what's appropriate. Of course, as budgetary controls, you are optimizing the needs, and it's built into your profit margins and models, etc., so that you are meeting the needs. And of course, if you know that there's a dependency level is required, it's not a surprise. So it's not suddenly I need one-to-one care. What are we going to do? We're going to have to go to agency, and it's suddenly an issue. We can kind of we can get a little bit of a foresight on that. Of course, it is a compliance area. Understaffing, of course, is incredibly important. It is a Chloe. Depensys is fantastic for proving evidence because it's got a fabulous history within it, so you can easily show that. And I think any process or system does need some good history there, because somebody might ask to see it. I think it's very clear that we're talking about transparency. You can see it, ease of access. It's all controlled. You can see from pretty much anywhere in the country or the planet exactly what's going on with the individual homes or the groups, and you can control access to different areas and hierarchies of the system. And ultimately, and again, back to kind of CoolCare's view of the world is because we've got a billing engine, you are able to make sure that you are invoicing correctly based on the dependency. So your invoicing, it matches the dependency level of the real world user. So yeah, I think any process that you might have that doesn't do one of those things, Depensys is probably a great solution for you. So we did questions as we were going along. I think everybody managed to work out that. Just make sure there's no questions left outstanding. If you guys have any questions, get in contact with us via our web portal. You can get in contact with Person-Centered Software as well. CoolCare, we do have a webinar coming up in January, which is about financing and sort of buying, selling care homes and businesses. We've got some CFOs to talk to us. We do have monthly training webinars completely free. So we do advertise those to existing customers. Come along and it's really about getting the best out of CoolCare. You subscribe to it, so you might as well get as maximum use as you possibly can. And then we do have all our historic webinars. The one I mentioned about Adore Care, the data-driven approach is a really good one with Andrew Long, and that's available on our YouTube and on our website. And then person-centered software themselves, they do webinars. They've got some future webinars coming up. They've got historic webinars coming in the past about getting the most out of person-centered software's products. You're going to have to do one, Lynette. You're going to have to get yourself a Depensis webinar up there as well on your own website. We can have ours if you want, but people will be like, "Who's this CoolCare, folks?" So yeah, so pop that on there. And of course, just a reminder, it's all about making operating your home easier, more efficient, and more profitable. And that's pretty much us. Anything to add before you go, Lynette?
No, not really. I think it's just important to identify, obviously, that using a product like Depensis is really to ensure that we've got adequate needs analysis for residents, which ensures the appropriate staffing model within services. And that's really just my sort of takeaway point for everyone.
Yeah, I think it helps. It just helps the information-led decision making, doesn't it? If you're doing it right, it gives you the right information and it helps you make the right decisions. It doesn't make your decisions for you. It just really guides you to the
Reinforces.
correct position, and you can justify it to the management. You can justify it um to a relative. You could justify it to the regulator. I think it's absolutely fantastic product. And that's it. Thank you very much for everybody for attending our webinar. We have recorded the webinar, so we will email out to you all a recording. And if you have any questions, as I sort of said earlier, get in touch with either Lynette via Person-Centered Software or ourselves. More than happy to answer your questions. And yeah, thanks very much and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.